So for a fighter, or any person competing, we enter into this kind of weeks before our competition that's called fight camp. And so basically, for those who don't know what that is, it's when training intensifies. We get more focused on putting together a game plan or practicing a specific strategy for the upcoming competition. For instance, if it's an MMA fight or a one-on-one jiu-jitsu super fight, you might put together a specific game plan for that specific opponent. And you practice that. When you're sparring against your teammates, you go for specific moves, you go for specific submissions, specific strikes, to really focus on your game plan. I'm, for one, do not like to have like a strict game plan. I like to be able to still have, freestyle, because you just never know what your opponent is going to bring to the table. You can watch, this is just my personal opinion, but you can watch tapes all day and think you're prepared for your opponent, and they go in there and show you a completely different person, especially if they haven't fought in a few months or even a year. So they might be a completely different fighter, have a different game plan, a different way of fighting. You just never know what your opponent's going to do. It's nice to have like an idea, especially for MMA. Is this person more of a striker? Is this person more of a grappler? Those are good details to know. But me overall, I don't really like to watch a lot of fight tapes for me. That's just me. I like to kind of go in with just a fresh mindset of reading them while I'm in there and fighting them while I'm in there, but just having a general idea of what they tend to like to do, but not a strict game plan. But in this fight camp, like I said, you really intensify your training. It's not so much of flow rolls. It's more intense. It's more competition-like rolls. It's more competition-like sparring. If you do work out outside of your jiu-jitsu gym or MMA gym, if you're doing like weights and stuff, you will probably more than likely intensify that and kind of make it more in the fight like training to get your cardio and your conditioning and your endurance up and things like that. So I have 2 competition dates that are coming up. One is jiu-jitsu, one is MMA. August 3rd is my Subspectrum championship opportunity that I get to roll against an opponent that I beat by points in February. So it's just a one match jiu-jitsu competition for a championship title for 125 pounds for Subspectrum in Iowa. So I'm super excited about that. And November 3rd, I will be fighting for Ignite fights here in Minnesota. So the promotion and stuff hasn't officially been produced for that. So once that's up and going and contracts are fully signed and all that on both of our ends and everything, I will start to promote that. But I wanted to, because of those 2 competitions coming up, I wanted to talk about what it looks like to balance life as whatever you are outside of a fighter. So, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I have a full-time job. I also do, I'm a minister at my church. I also am a part-time chaplain. So all of these things are still going on even when I'm training for a competition or training for a fight. And it's so important as a fighter that I've found personally that you know how to balance life when you're in fight camp, because I learned the hard way when it comes to not balancing life in fight camp, how unhealthy that can be for you. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who have gone through this or have experienced what it feels like to not have a healthy balance of all of these things. And I remember it was my second fight that I fought at Mystic Lake for LFA. And there's a few things in that fight camp that I learned. I learned that, one, fighting at 105 is too small. I did fight one more time. My third fight was at 105. and I will not fight at 105. It's too small for me. Unfortunately, I am short for 115 and 120. But I do not feel strong. I feel very just fragile and weak at 105. It's just too small for me, even though frame wise and like height wise, everybody at 105 is more ideal for me to go against. But 115 is definitely where I will stick at for MMA specifically. And jiu-jitsu, I will fluctuate between 115, 125. But I learned in that fight camp that I needed to learn how to balance my personal life and fight camp. There was a season or a time during that fight camp that I realized I was putting way too much into this fight camp. It was taking over everything. Everything was surrounded by this fight camp. I was feeling like I wasn't at home as much as I needed to be. And I remember there was one time I really felt God speaking to me during this fight camp. And I remember being like, I love fighting. I really do. But it's not fulfilling, you know, like this is fun and this is great. But as a Christian, like ultimately, I want to do everything that I can to represent Christ, to bring others to Christ, to share my faith, to share my relationship with Christ with other people. And that is what is fulfilling for me, is truly to be his representation here on earth. And as much as like, you know, God wants us to enjoy this creation, this world that he created, obviously within the standards and the protection and the boundaries that he places. But although he wants us to enjoy that, there's still like a balance, you know, there's a balance of also still serving him and following him. And so there was just during this camp, I just kind of felt like, man, I could be doing something else at my church right now. And I'm spending all these hours and all this time here at this gym, and I could be spending more time at home with my husband. And we had 2 daughters. Now we have 3, but at the time we had 2 daughters, and it's like, I feel like I'm pulling time away from them. And also I was in school at that time too. And I'm like, I could be spending more time studying, and I'm here at this fight camp. And I really felt during that fight camp, it became a strain. It started to become just an unhealthy balance of being there too much. And ultimately I ended up working too hard. A little bit was my coach at the time, my MMA coach specifically at the time that was training me, that was kind of old school and focused heavily on you have to put in the time and be at the gym and be working one-on-one with him. And he was a UFC champ beforehand, before like previous years before. But yeah, I felt myself being like, I'm doing too much and this will not happen again. I also had cut out weightlifting, which was not a good idea. I lost a lot of my strength. But in that fight camp is where I really learned, like, I will not do this again. I will make sure I'm getting my rest. I will make sure there are days, you know what? I'm not going to listen to my body, or I'm going to spend my time at home with my family. And I'm going to spend this time away from the gym today. Like, I've been in the gym 3 days this week. That's good enough for this week, and that's okay. I'll train next week. There's next week to come. And just learning how to balance that. And you have to listen to your body. You have to just listen to yourself. And again, as a follower of Christ, there's ways that I can use fighting to really reach people, obviously, but that doesn't need to be my world. That shouldn't be my number one thing. I've been blessed with a husband and beautiful children, and though they also have to be a priority. And they're supportive, super supportive. But as I enter into these next 2 fight camps for these 2 competitions, I'm making sure I focus on that. I listen to my body. If I feel like I've been hit by a bus and I've put in some work this week, it's okay to get my rest. Like, rest is also needed as a part of fight camp. because you can only train your body so hard, and it needs its rest. It needs to, you need to be able to sleep well and let your muscles recoup so you can go back and put in the work that you need to. And everybody's fight camp looks different. I've heard some MMA fighters that don't spar at all during their fight camp. They don't feel that helps them. There are some fighters that all they do is spar. There's some that, blend whatever that they're doing, whether it's weightlifting or cardio or whatever it is that they blend together. But for me, I like to blend weightlifting and then also making sure if I'm doing jujitsu, I'm getting my rolling rounds in and maybe taking less breaks than what I was doing before, or, specific rounds I'm focusing maybe only on control. I'm not worried about submissions that round, or I'm specifically going for a certain submission or working on a specific takedown and different things like that. And same thing with MMA, you just have your different things that you hone in on, but it's so, so important that you have a healthy balance, especially if you are someone who has a family or you have a full-time job, you have other things that you do have commitments to. There are fortunate people, that fighting is their full-time job. So you have a little more time to, flex with, you have more time because that is your full-time job. You don't have to worry about a full-time job and all these other things. And maybe you're single, or you don't, have kids or a spouse or somebody that you have to make sure you're making time for and things like that. But, I just want to encourage people that have that balance, and maybe you're not a fighter. Maybe you have, a hobby that you really enjoy doing, but especially, as Christians, just have that healthy balance. Make sure you're keeping, Christ first. That should be your priority. And then if you have a family or whatever other things that fall underneath that, make sure that is a priority. And I think it's just so important that you don't burn yourself out in these fight camps where, now you're going to the competitions and you've put all of your energy and your muscle and everything into these fight camps, and then you get to the competition, now you're burnt out. And now your body is like, I have nothing to give you. I have no fight to give you because you put it all in fight camp, So just stay balanced, keep everything balanced. Just, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, all of that is an important part of a fighter in fight camp, is making sure that you are keeping things balanced, keeping things, healthy, and not overworking yourself in any form or fashion. So with that, I leave you with this. Continue to pray, continue to nurture your family, and continue to train like a war machine.